This is part 2 of how to wedge it like a pro. Let's see how we can put all those backswing elements to good use on the downswing. In addition to looking at the downswing here, we're going to take a look at kind of that left arm parallel still in the backswing, and we'll call that our transition area, just to give a better understanding of how all these elements blend together, because the golf swing shouldn't be everything going back, then everything come down. There is certainly a blend of the wear and the wind, the body and club move, to kind of blend the backswing and downswing together. So let's just jump right in and take a look at all of our tilts here on the left. You can see as we get to the top of the swing, still have a fair amount of hip tilt and a fair amount of shoulder tilt, with that virtual spine number still remaining very close to 90 degrees. And as we get to that left arm parallel in the downswing, we retain a lot of those tilts still, especially with the vertical nature of the virtual spine angle. And then as we scroll them on down, we can see where somewhere in this ballpark between these two frames is when the hips and the shoulders really kind of level out, and we can see how low the club head is. So what this golfer isn't doing, what great wedge players don't do that we've measured, is get a lot of this side tilt, this right side tilt right from the top of the downswing. They're keeping that spine very neutral. That keeps the left shoulder low and the left hip low, so they're able to drop the arms, get everything moving with the club head. And we can see his wrist angle. It's starting to decrease, or increase actually, right away, decreasing his wrist cock. So he's not trying to drag a bunch of lag into these shots. And I know we get a lot of amateur golfers who try to supply different power sources for these shots. And this isn't a power shot. This is a finesse wedge, a distance wedge. So we're really trying to think about controlling our speed and our loft. That's really going to tell the ball its trajectory and its distance. Now, if we jump over here to the right side of the screen, we can take a look at his turn. So he's roughly 30-60 at the top, give or take. And as he comes down, we can see how quickly, or I should say how smoothly, both of those numbers start changing right away. So there's not a firing of the hips that's happening. He's not trying to hold his upper body back and release his hips. None of those things. They're both moving right away, but they're moving fairly gradually. And then when we get down here with the hips square, we can see he still has 20 degrees of negative rotation with his upper body, his rib cage. And then as we get the rib cage square, we can see he's about 11.5 degrees open with his lower body. Now from here, you can see where the club head is. It's right around knee height, really kind of the very beginning of the delivery phase with the club head. And from this point into impact, you can see how much ground the chest covers relative to the ground that the hips cover. The hips are basically done. The chest still has a good bit of work to do, and that's really what carries the club around and puts those hands right in front of that left thigh in this case, and gives you that nice moderate amount of lean that you need for a shot of this distance. Now let's look at two more face-on angles, and we've got on the left, we've got his center of pelvis and his center of torso numbers that we looked at in part 1. And then on the right, we also have that line coming up straight through the middle of the golf ball vertically, and then a head bubble. We want to really drive home the kind of how it's done, that the golfer can move his two centers, his pelvis and his torso, forward without really drifting in front of the golf ball or doing anything, kind of goofy relative to where the head is in relation to the golf ball. So if we take him on up, we can see now that the pelvis is negative, just slightly on our left here. And now kind of right around transition, everything starts to kind of glide forward. And we can see these numbers really start to gain on one another to where we're going to have the same amount right in through here. So right at that late in the golf swing, when that club's right around knee height, he's perfectly centered, upper body right on top of the lower body. And that provides a really good, not only angle of attack for these shots, but really helps control the loft and really provides that clean contact. And that's, you got to have that solid, clean contact to really be able to start to really hone in and control your distances. And this is one of the ways we see the pros do that. So he's not trying to hold lag and make any crazy wrist angles. He's doing it by controlling where his upper and lower body go. Then we can see on the right that, yeah, the head does move forward slightly, but it really centers right around in here in where his hat is relative to that yellow line, kind of stays right here, and then it just rotates. So as the body's changing, we can see that on the left, the head stays pretty stationary when he's delivering the club. Very normal looking head movement. And I just wanted to show how these two kind of pieces kind of coexist, where the lateral movement of both the lower and upper, how that doesn't necessarily mean the head follows those same amount of movements. Now this down the line view and this rotation of view, I think it's going to be surprising for some and maybe make more sense for others. So we're going to take a look here at how the golf club starts to really shallow. And there is a shallowing move even on short shots like this. We certainly don't want to play really any golf shots from a steep, quote unquote steep sort of angle. So we want to look at, we've got our laser line shooting out of the butt of this golf club again. And that's that long skinny yellow line that you see there. And we're going to see kind of, you can see how it's kind of pointing at the ball and then points out beyond the ball. That's the shallowing of the club head. And it's a little difficult to see from this down the line view, but you can certainly see it in the rotation view, how the club head's in screen view and then it kind of dips back behind the screen. What I want you to take note of here is the rotational numbers, because a lot of golfers feel that to shallow the club, you've got to make kind of a shoulder move, an external shoulder move, internal shoulder move, however you want to feel that. You've got to either drive the elbow forward, this rear elbow, or it's simply the turn that shallows the club. And we can see here, as this laser line is bouncing around from kind of at the ball to shallow, we can see there's really right at 1 degree or even a little less of rotation happening. The right shoulder's not really doing anything. It's how the golfer is kind of positioning and rotating their forearms, and in conjunction with that, their wrists, that is really making this club head shallow. And it's a very quiet time. The club has next to no speed at this part of the golf swing, and it's really a good time to do this because you're not going to really disrupt the club on the way down as it starts to pick up speed. So when this little quiet spot at the top of the swing, you're going to see a lot of great players take advantage of that and really kind of learn how to shallow the club. And I think this is a great place. We know the club shallows. When it shallows, I think is hugely important, but not only wedge shots, but throughout all of your golf swings. Then as we scroll him down, we're going to see what we saw in the backswing, where that laser pointer now is hidden directly behind the hands. And when you're viewing your swing from face on, this is a great thing to see. You want the club bisecting the hands right here on the downswing. Now our last view is going to be very similar to what we looked at in part one. We're going to take a look at where the loft or where that face is pointing in the downswing. And then we're going to take a look at how the golfer is kind of managing his extension, or his keeping his rear end on that pane of glass, so to speak. So his tush line, we'll call it. So as he's coming down, we can see at this part that we looked at in the golf swing, this kind of shaft parallel to the ground in part one of this series, we saw that red line, that red arrow pointing out there, fairly level with the ground. We can see it's a little higher up in the downswing. So this golfer is maintaining the loft. He's not getting that club head pointing directly at the ball this early in the swing. He's maintaining the loft and preserving some of that open face angle. I believe, if I remember correctly, it's about 43 degrees open at this point, and he strikes it 0.8 degrees open. So he still has 40 degrees of rotation at this point in the golf swing. I don't think it's a great idea to start to really point that club face at the ball this early for these type of wedge shots. And then as we see here on the right side of the screen, this pane of glass, we see how he really kind of controls where his hips are moving relative to thrusting him forward towards the golf ball or keeping him back. And this is where that kind of staggered stance, that little bit of an open stance that you can see from down the line, really kind of aids this, where there's not a lot of drastic movement. He's just simply rolling his hips open in the downswing as the club's continuing on down to impact. And you can see he's got all the classic moves there with keeping that left side of the cheek now against that pane of glass. So there you have it. You have the anatomy of a wedge swing in 2 parts. We'll put a link here to part 1 if you haven't seen that. And the more of these elements that you can adopt, the more neutral your golf swing will be for these type of distance wedges, and the closer you'll start to hit it.